Welcome to the Entrepreneurial Edge. I'm Chris Bishop and we're in Dubai here speaking to one of the big names in business here, a gentleman by the name of Rohit Walia, the founder and executive chairman of Alpen Capital. He was once asked by a journalist, what does he do in his spare time? His answer was, work. So is that very much says a lot about who you are?
Hasn't changed much since then.
So just give us an idea where your roots lie in business and in life.
Well, I started my career with American Express Bank in India, went on to Bank of America, and about 26 years ago I moved to Dubai to work with Mashreq Bank. Did that for about 10-12 years. And then we got started as an investment bank and a private bank. We got two licenses. We were one of the earliest licensees of the IFC, doing both investment banking and private banking asset management.
And just a little bit further back, I mean, were you from a family of entrepreneurs, your parents?
No, my father used to work, was a director of a company called GC in India. So a banker, still a banker.
And then you started out in banking, you've got something like 35 or more years experience in international banking yourself. Where was your path in banking? Where did you start out? I
started with American Express Bank in India. Did another 5 years with Bank of America, and then another 12 years here with Mashreq Bank.
And what was the bottom rung of the ladder in those days?
Started as an intern, as a trainee. That is as bottom as you can get, right? Straight from college.
And that was it? You always loved it?
Yes, fabulous fun.
So, in terms of getting the entrepreneurial edge, at what time in your life was there a moment in particular when you decided you were going to go out on your own?
I don't think I really decided on my own that I would go out on my own. One of my ex-colleagues from American Express approached me and said, we'll set up a Swiss private bank in Dubai. That's when the DIFC was born. And that's how we got started. Just an idea. Let's execute, let's set up a bank. And life kind of moved along. 15 years have passed since then.
And Alpen Capital, which you founded, where did that idea come out of?
See, that idea came out of setting up. It was actually born out of the idea of setting up a private bank here. So we were born here as Saracen Alpen, as a Swiss private bank. And Alpen Capital was set up to support the private banking business, and that's how Alpen Capital was born. It was born here in Dubai. Okay,
and what were the beginnings of this bank?
5 people with an office in the media city. This building had still to be constructed at that point in time. So we were the first entrance to our building number 5 on the other side.
And that first day when you opened the doors, do you still remember the feeling you got?
No, I don't remember. It's such too long back.
But okay, from those handful of people, how quickly did the bank grow, the capital grow?
Grew very fast. So on the private banking side, we measure ourselves by the amount of money we manage. So we crossed 5 billion in assets very quickly. We had offices across the region, in every GCC country in India.
During that time, the entrepreneurial edge within you, how did you bring that into play, bearing in mind that you already had a long career and you'd learned plenty of tricks along the way in international banking?
I think we tried to avoid all the things which would slow us down in some of the bigger organizations. Cut the fluff, get to work, don't spend too much time on internal politics and don't allow anybody else to do it. So whatever we didn't like, because if there's something you don't like in this organization, there's only one person to blame, yourself.
And from the numbers, how fast did you grow in size from that first day?
We grew from 5 people to more than 100 people very quickly. So we grew very fast.
And how did you grow the business on the other side?
It grew on both the businesses complement each other. So typically on the private banking side, when we generate assets, we are talking to clients, helping them raise money, sell businesses, buy businesses. So it automatically complements each other. One business, when you do a transaction on one side, it automatically brings in business on the other side. We've seen that work very well.
And just give us an idea of the era of when you founded Alpen Capital. How robust was the world economy then?
It was a perfect economy. There was no problems. There was no Middle East issues. There was no Trump around. So things were moved very well. The economies were on a growth path. Things were more predictable than they are today. I think I always tell people there's so many loose rockets flying around. You don't know which one has your name on it. Yeah, that's a problem today.
And it's also an issue that has been mentioned by a number of your colleagues here, and the fact that the world is so interconnected now. Yeah. When someone sneezes in New York, the Middle East can get a cold.
Correct.
How serious is that, are you seeing in your business?
Very serious, because there's a transaction happening, and like you correctly said, if somebody takes a decision, whether it's the China trade war or whatever else you want to talk about, it immediately impacts whatever is happening or not happening out here. Yeah, the world is very interconnected.
And in terms of your business then, how do you see it here at near the end of 2019? The economies have been through a lot in the last decade. What do you see?
Well, see, I think our business is not completely in here. So we are all over the GCC. So some economies are up, some are down. And then we've also spread far and wide over the last 3 to 5 years. So we've got South Asia. I've just come back from a very interesting country, Myanmar.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which has had its political issues too.
There's business happening there. There's lots of stuff happening there. So we're covering about 8 or 9 countries out from here, including Africa.
Well, we'll talk a lot more about your investments in Africa in the second half. But in those early days, it sounds too easy. Anyone listening, let's say you went from 5 people to 100, and then you built up your book very, very quickly. But what were the problems that you faced in the early days?
Actually, not too many. Not too many. In the early days, life was, like I said, life was good. Economies were growing. There was lots of opportunity. You could do anything and you'd be successful. Seriously, it was that simple.
And you've been in banking all your life. You still am. But when you started out this business, were there hard lessons that you still learned?
Yeah, there were lots of hard lessons. Yeah, there were lots of hard lessons. I think because typically our business now is more advisory in nature. We're not giving out money. Yeah, so there were a lot of relationships which you thought were actual relationships, but was in those days you had a checkbook in your hand, and today you don't have a checkbook in your hand. So things, some things you took for granted, some people you took for granted that you would get business, did not happen.
And just tell me just a little bit about how your business works. So it's like a long relationship then of advisory of raising capital.
The way the business works, if you look at Alpen Capital, the investment banking side, it has 2 lines of business. One is to raise money for people, for their investments, for the projects, or refinance, whatever you want it. And the second side of the business is M&A. So we have clients who want to sell their businesses, who want to buy businesses, looking for equity. That's it. We don't do a third thing. And typically, because we are a small organization, unlike the large names in the business, it works purely on relationships. So our customers are the who's who of the region, but they're people who know us for a long time, so they trust us, I suppose.
I say in the tough world of business, coming to the end of the second decade in this century, how do you think? I know there's a lot more compliance everywhere, which is a good thing, but what are the big problems you have to deal with?
Like you said, compliance is a huge story by itself. To get somebody onboarded, I still joke with people. In the good old days when we had to open an account for you, we'd ask you for your date of birth. Today, when we want to open an account, we ask you, why were you born? And then we'll decide whether we want to do business with you or not. It's literally down to that.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely, I tell you.
And you think that's at the core of your business, this compliance issue?
No, it's something which is serious, but I think we've taken it to another extreme now. Something we'll have to give.
But how much further do you think? There's people swapping data all over the world now, whether they like it or not, in terms of compliance. Someone was telling me recently that people can get your date of birth from anywhere, and then they can do all kinds of things. In your business, how much further do you think the compliance can go to make it a stronger, safer business?
Not very far. Again, we are very careful of who we deal with. We don't have too many clients, a couple of hundred people, whom most of us, whether me or rest of my team, we know for a long time. So compliance is not really a big issue. We know what our clients are, or we just don't onboard them.
And here, as I say, we'll talk about your investments in Africa in the second half, but here in Dubai, it seems a fairly robust economy. Every time I come here, you look out the window,
there are new buildings.
There's new buildings, there's more buildings being built. And next year as well, Expo 2020 is coming here, which is going to be a huge boost, not just for Dubai, but also for the image of Dubai around the world.
And for the region. It's going to be huge.
What are your hopes for it?
Well, it's going to be great for hospitality, great for retail, great for Dubai, I would say. Everybody will figure out. I think everybody anyway knows Dubai, but whoever few people are left in the world who don't will figure us out by next year. Yeah?
And for investment, do you think?
Investment will be huge. If you look at the infrastructure which is being built out there, I was there a couple of months ago. It's fabulous.
And people are talking about as many as maybe 10 million visitors.
Yeah, well, I went to the Shanghai Expo. That was getting 1 million a day. Yeah.
So it may be even more than that.
Even more than that.
What would you say, if anyone out there watching this, a lot of them are young entrepreneurs or would-be entrepreneurs, what are some of the little lessons you think you can tell them in the story, you think, that would maybe help them in their careers?
You stay client-centric, you don't cut corners, you deliver what you say you will deliver, or don't promise what you can't deliver, I always say. I think that fixes the way you do your work, do your business. Yeah.
Is there anything you would have done differently in your business, you think?
Not really. I think we made a few mistakes, but then everybody makes mistakes. So hopefully we learn from them. Yeah.
And what would you say the biggest lessons you've learned as an entrepreneur over the last few years?
I think at points in time I gave a lot of leeway to some people, some colleagues, some clients, everybody. I think at points you need to know when to cut your losses. If something is not working out, you need to put a stop to it. And I have a very high frustration index. I tolerate a lot. Yeah. It's a weakness and a plus point. Something one has to figure out. Yeah.
And is there anything that you would do differently if you did it again?
No. Like I said, a few mistakes. And if you do it again, you'll make a few different mistakes. Yeah? That's all that'll happen.
And you say, you're always working all the time. I mean, just give us an idea of the amount of hours you put in a week.
I don't put in a lot of hours. No, I'm not a very late night person. So I start early, finish early, and work a little bit more after I finish and go to sleep. I travel a lot. What else can I tell you?
You just outlined, just to start with, your interest in the African continent.
So we're trying to replicate in Africa what we've done very successfully, both in the Middle East and South Asia, which are our main markets. So to start with, we started looking at the financial institutions and the finance companies who are looking for funding in these countries. We did our first transaction in Kenya about a year and a half, 2 years ago, where we funded a small bank called Victoria Commercial Bank. Since then, we moved on. We've done a very large transaction for the Tata Group, which covered about 7 or 8 countries like Ghana, Kenya, Nigeria, where we took the receivables off the books. Actually, it's a very interesting transaction. We took the receivables off the books in all these countries, put them in SPV in Abu Dhabi in the ADGM, and got it funded out here. And that's going to become very big. That's a small transaction to start with, but it'll go to $250 million over the next few months. We're looking at a bank in Nigeria. We're not looking. We're going to close that transaction, I suppose, in the next 4 to 6 weeks. And we're looking at a very interesting project in Senegal, a low-cost housing project backed by the government there.
And how big is that? This project?
The project is $500 million. It's a large project. Yeah. So there's interesting pockets of investment opportunities, I think, in that continent. One has to go out there and have a look at them. Yeah. I think sitting out here, we've just started doing Africa in the last 2.5 years. So it's been an eye-opener.
What have you encountered in your business in the continent?
In Africa, I think some of the misconceptions you have sitting out here, and we have them on many things. I think we get very influenced by what we see on TV, but it's not necessarily the truth. You go to Ghana, you go to Nigeria, and they said, be careful, this, that, and the other. Very civilized place to work in, I must say. I've been there 3 times now. Yeah.
And that's one of the great things. I've been working on this continent for 25 years, and a lot of people actually don't see what's happening on the ground. There's a lot of misconceptions from afar. How far do you think maybe perhaps the continent's selling itself a bit short, you think, when it comes to such things?
Yeah, it is selling itself short. I think there's a complete misconception on what's happening or not happening in that place. And I've personally gone to many of these countries. I plan to go again over the next few months. So how do you correct that misconception? I suppose by more programs like yours. Yeah.
And how much more pragmatic do you find perhaps some of the political leadership in some of these countries? There's a feeling that there's a tremendous move towards being more practical when it comes to inviting investment and business into the continent. How are you reading it?
very difficult to comment. I'm not sure. Because I haven't paid too much attention to that yet, because we haven't focused on the businesses there. We've stuck to banks. Banks always need money. That's the raw material, or the finance companies. And they're fairly well managed people, at least for the few countries I've been to. And it's fairly politically stable of at least the 6-7 countries we are covering at present. We haven't seen anything because ultimately it's, we are investing, we are putting other people's money in there. And I haven't come across somebody who said that I will not do Nigeria, I will not do Ghana. No, there's a lot of interest.
And also, you're also looking at investments in Kenya as well, and East Africa. Just give us an idea of what you're up to there.
Kenya, again, financial institutions. Yeah, we're looking at funding financial. We're going to fund a very interesting finance company there, which was set up only for women. To lend women to run small businesses, buy houses, impact investments as they call it. So we're looking at a few such ones, not only in Kenya but in some of the other African countries too.
Could you give us a little case study there with that particular investment you're talking about in Kenya? Just in terms of how much was asked for.
I'll tell you an interesting story. So I met them last month in Kenya. So it's a finance company set up by women, only for women. And a few years ago they made a mistake. They brought in a few men, and they made a few loans to a couple of men, and that's resulted in a huge bad loss for them. So they're trying to fix it right now.
They had to write it off.
Yeah, but we're trying to get them some funding to get them rolling on.
Yeah. And what do you find when you do arrive in the African continent? What kind of reception do you normally get from the?
I think people are happy to see us. People are happy that people are coming from the Middle East. Middle East is also an enigma out there. It's got pots of money and rolling in cash running out on the roads. So people are happy to see. People want to talk. People want to do business here. And a lot of African businesses have now got headquartered in Dubai. At the DMCC, we have lots of clients who've set up their family offices at the DMCC or the DIFC. So there's serious interest.
And there is an argument, isn't there, that there are a lot more links maybe than there were a decade ago, certainly 20 years ago, between Dubai and the African continent. Where do you think that's going?
It's only one way it can go. It can only go up because links have just started developing. And we had this conference here last week, I think, which the Dubai Economic Department hosted. There was a huge amount of interest from people, both people who had flown in and from here to see what the opportunities are.
And in Southern Africa, you said you're investing in Tata Corporation.
Not in South Africa. South Africa, we haven't done any work yet. Though the Tatas are headquartered for the African business, they're headquartered in Johannesburg. Yeah, but we've done business for them around the region, around Africa.
And a fast-growing company there. I mean, what's the potential, you think?
For whom? For the Tatas?
Yeah.
Oh, fabulous potential. So what they do, it's very interesting. They sell individual buses, trucks to entrepreneurs, 1 or 2 pieces. Yeah. So all these guys who are actually truck drivers or bus drivers have become entrepreneurs. Done a fabulous job of doing this across 8 or 9 countries, I think. Yeah. They sell farm equipment to people who cannot afford to buy it over long. So we are actually working with them to set up a leasing company in Africa to finance this side of the business and to manage the foreign currency exposures there.
So this is part of what you do, isn't it? This impact investing as well. What other projects are you looking at the moment?
Well, all the banks and finance companies we are looking to put money into need to have a story around impact investment, SME funding, low-cost housing, whatever would be helpful for the environment, for the people in general. Yeah, so women inclusion, that's a big topic of discussion these days. Yeah.
When you're scouting for investments or looking, what do you look for in the continent? What are the beacons for you that attract you?
Management. How are they managing the business? What the numbers look like? What the plans going forward are? And then many of these places are very well managed. I mean, I was very impressed with Ghana, for example, of all the financial institutions I met there. They know exactly what they're doing, and that was not the impression I had before I went there. So it's a learning experience.
And how much business are you doing now, and what's your target for the future in the African continent?
See, we've got about 6 or 7 clients at the moment, and I expect that to at least treble up by the end of next year.
And money-wise, what's the target?
Money-wise, it's something we don't like to talk about. Yeah. But yeah, we should do anything in revenue terms as far as we are concerned, anything between $3 to $5 million next year.
And also, you're on other continents too. You're in Sri Lanka. You're in Cambodia.
Yeah. Similar concept. So in Sri Lanka, we have financed, I would say, nearly every bank there, about $750 million over the last 2 years. Banks and finance companies. Cambodia financed a very interesting company there called Prasak. Very profitable, does very well.
What does it do?
What does it do? So I'll give you another good story on Prasak. They open at 4 in the morning. So I was there one morning to take a look at what the CEO had been telling me, and the fisherwoman walks in, borrows $10, goes, buys fish, sells fish, and comes back and returns it in the evening. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's another question a lot of entrepreneurs, I'm sure, they're asking, how do you actually zero in on these companies? It's probably not every day you bump into someone who knows.
Word of mouth, I think. Word of mouth. You talk to people, and once you've done a few such transactions, you get introduced to more such people who are. When I talked to you about this finance company doing women only in Kenya, we've got one we're looking at in Nepal, we've got 2 in India, and 1 in Sri Lanka.
And due diligence on these small operations?
Very easy to do. It's not so simple. You see, like I said, you meet management, you figure out what they're doing, and they're not so small, by the way. They're not so small. Talk to people, talk to the auditors, talk to people who deal with them. These are small countries. It's not very difficult to find out. Yeah.
And you're also into Myanmar as well, which has had somewhat of a troubled past.
Checkered history,
shall we say. But you're going in there, and
well, I was there. I've just come back yesterday from there. I spent 3 days in that place. Very, very interesting. It's a world which has been closed for I don't know how many years. So just starting to develop. Great potential, nice people. They need everything. There's nothing which cannot be done in Myanmar. So they're putting the rules, regulations in place.
What areas are you looking to invest in there in Myanmar?
Banks and finance companies, yeah, at the moment. So we met a few interesting people. We'll see. They've got different rules, regulations. There's a lot of work to be done in that place. Yeah.
Okay, and it must be fascinating in some ways to get an economy like that that's just opening up. It must be like sort of when the Berlin Wall came down in Europe.
I think much, even more behind. Yeah. Even more behind. Yeah. It'll be fascinating to work in that place.
What's giving you hope when you look into the future? What's encouraging you to go in there and take the risk? There's
no risk. If you know what you're doing, theoretically, there's little risk, and it'd be great fun to help that place grow up. Yeah, if you land up going to a grown-up country, go to any country in Europe, they're far ahead of the game. Yeah? So here, I think we'd be in the place to write the rules of what the game should be, and play it accordingly.
What do you think makes a great entrepreneur?
Passion, I suppose. Passion for work, not much else.
You never ever thought of giving it up at any stage when you were younger?
And then do what?
I don't know.
I also don't know, so I'll stick to it till I find out.
What else would you do if you hadn't been an entrepreneur?
I really wouldn't know. It's not entrepreneur, it's working.
Yeah.
If I wasn't working, would I go to the beach down from what I can see from here? No.
You wouldn't?
No.
So you wouldn't sit down and write the great novel, you wouldn't...
I read the novels when I not write one.
No.
I'm not a big guy for writing stuff like that.
So great entrepreneurs, do you think they're born, or do you think they're made?
Both. Very difficult to say whether they're born or made. No, it would be very difficult to answer this question. Yeah? A question of both.
And who are the entrepreneurs that you look up to?
Bill Gates, that guy Narayan Murthy in India. Some of these guys have done a fabulous job on. They've changed the world for all practical purpose in how we do our businesses. Yeah.
They changed the world. What would you, what would you like to be your people to say about you in years to come? Your legacy.
Oh, this is a boring world. Yeah. So I think what we would like to achieve is to be the port of first call when a client of ours wants to do something in our line of business. Whether it's to, like I said, raise money, sell his business. It's always great that they think of you first and call you, instead of calling one of the big firms out here.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm afraid that's all we've got time for on this edition of the Entrepreneurial Edge here in Dubai. I was speaking to Rohit Walia, the founder and executive chairman of Alpen Capital, about his forays into Africa and many continents around the world. Afraid that's all for this edition of the Entrepreneurial Edge. From me, Chris Bishop in Dubai. It's goodbye.